The Odyssey is coming out and we haven't seen it yet, but we know the story. So we're going to pick out some books that you should read if you love the Odyssey, which is basically a story of finding your way home, no matter the odds. And also when home doesn't always necessarily mean a place, because it's this idea of home. Back to your family, back to your loved ones, back to your safe place, back from whence you began, even though you're probably not the same version of yourself that you were when you left. And some of that is looking for things that have stayed the same, and very often they haven't, because if you've changed, the place you go back to has probably changed too. Oh, and obviously we're looking for a hero or heroine, but they're imperfect, right? Like Odysseus is an extremely imperfect hero. We can start with some actual classics. Welcome to my library. I have these organized by my own ridiculous system. Don't try to figure it out. I would say, obviously, Moby Dick is very Odyssey coded. It is man's fight against a giant whale, man's fight against annihilation, set in the sea, a very, shall we say, complicated hero. I don't even know if you would call him a hero. There are monsters that they're going to face, same as Odyssey. It is enormous. It is much bigger. Let me show you my Odyssey. This is the Odyssey. From here back, it's notes, but the rest of this is the actual book. So Moby Dick's quite a bit bigger. It can be a hard read for some people. Disclaimer, it got rough for me at times. Let's see what else we have here. The Three Musketeers is less of, I would say, a journey and more of the adventure, fighting, comradeness. It's a really good read. This is another enormous one, but Alexander Dumas, spectacular writer. And it is another classic. Whatever movie you've seen of the Three Musketeers, that's not what the book is. It's much more adventurous, much more solving mysteries, swashbuckling friends. Moving into our second section, this is away from the classics, Wicked, which is the retelling of The Wizard of Oz. If this is not a journey home or a journey looking for home, trying to get back home, finding people along the way who will help you, finding out who you are and whether or not you fit into the idea of what home is. It is a weird book. It's a weird story. If you're thinking Wizard of Oz, Wicked is not. If you're thinking Wicked the movie, Wicked is not. There are monsters. There are people trying to rid themselves of this heroine and her erstwhile friends. But it is, I don't know what's the word I want to use. There's a spiciness to it that you would not expect. Moving along, these two are children's stories. Children's stories tend to have a lot of the hero, heroine fighting against what they think is evil and finding out along the way that it's not black and white, and sometimes the rescue can change you into what you're trying to fight against. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, classic. There are multiple books. It's the Chronicles of Narnia and that one. Wildwood, I found recently, and this one is really good. This has a female protagonist who is on that edge of childhood, starting to understand that the world has lied to you and that the adults don't always know what they're doing. And she has to decide if she actually wants to go home at all. Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Climate change and economic issues have changed the world. There's a bit of post-apocalyptic danger, starting over again, but in reality, it is the heroine trying to find her way back to something that looks maybe like home, some kind of safety for her community. It is in the midst of the world having lost its mind, and you're not sure if the world itself is going to be able to go back to home or what was. She goes on a dangerous journey to get there, loses many things, loses many parts of herself, and by the end is a very different version of who she started out being. A lot of people said that Butler was a fortune teller, soothsayer, however you want to call it, because she basically described a lot of things that were happening in 2025, I think it was. Tremendous journey. This is one of the best ones. Oh, this was a good one. Kakeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This is retelling one of the stories in the Ramayana, and it involves gods. It involves a female heroine who is trying to, let's say, come into her power, cost that she has to pay on the journey there. It involves her fighting bad guys, journeying through the kingdom, and again, very far away from where she started. And there are people who think that she ends up being the bad guy and that she's irredeemable, but you gotta read it and figure that out for yourself. You also could read the original. Oh, gotta get this out of here. I leave bookmarks in so many books. The original books by L. Frank Baum are multiple Oz books. The first Wizard of Oz, Dorothy and the Tin Man and Lion and all of that stuff that got adapted into a movie is just one of the Oz books, and I read that one, but I don't know if I want to read the other ones. This is a much less interesting version of Wicked. I feel like we know a lot of this story, but I was surprised by some things in here that actually got transformed by Hollywood, and it wasn't a part of the first story, and it makes you wonder about the propaganda. But this is friends trying to find their way home too, and the innocent Dorothy, and does she stay innocent? I found one. So we're not checking the bookcase behind the camera because that's mostly memoir and art books and politics. So we're gonna do one more for sure. The hero that starts out as the hero, and then you wonder if he's the villain, and the journey and all of that good stuff. Dune. I didn't love reading this, but if you like that kind of story, you might like it. There are lots of people who love his book, and the movie's coming out. I think the last one, obviously, a Game of Thrones is definitely that. This one does not have technically one main hero. The hero changes over time, and you're wondering who is going to actually survive this journey. This is a family, the Starks of Winterfell, who end up being forced into proximity with the king. As a result, they lose everything: home, safety. Every individual member of the family has to go on their own journey to figure out what their life looks like now. And it takes you through different points of view, so you never know what's going to happen to who. This is a crazy book. We have been waiting 3,000 years for Martin to finish writing this. If you saw the series, that's not the real ending because the book hasn't ended. And there's definitely monsters in that one that get fought, and there are different gods. This one, you know, definitely. Lord of the Ring. Hello. They're heroes on the longest journey ever to save the world, to save their home, and to stop the bad guys. Now, I would argue that I don't know if the Odyssey is about stopping any bad guys, right? Technically, what took Odysseus away from home to begin with was going to fight in Troy because Menelaus' wife had been taken. But was she taken? Did she leave of her own free will? Did you have a right to ransack this town? Technically, the Greeks sacked so many towns around Troy. They took so many people hostage, murdered so many people. By the time you get to the Odyssey, I think they are kind of the bad guys. And who are they fighting against? Maybe the will of the gods? Do the gods really want them to go home? And that's an interesting thing about those stories, that Hollywood changes very often, and I'm very interested to see what the movie does with this. In that, in the original stories, gods play a huge role in what is happening to everybody. If you saw Brad Pitt as Achilles, it looks like the gods are omnipresent, but they're not actually taking over people's bodies and influencing them to do things, or pushing them out of the way so they don't get hit, or pushing them in the way so they do get hit, or having these big debates about, oh, but I love these guys and let's protect them, but you protected those guys last time. That doesn't actually exist in any of the movies, and I get why, because it would make it a little absurd, but it creates an antagonist in the story, right? Like, technically, the fighters are kind of fighting against the will of the gods ultimately, because they're saying everything that everybody does is the will of some god. Whereas stories like this are just basically saying that there's bad people in the world and you gotta go get them. I guess Homer could argue the bad people of the world, still the will of the gods. If you want to get Greek-ish, obviously, you can do The Song of Achilles, which basically tells the story of Troy. It tells the story of the Iliad, which is the story before the Odyssey. You meet Odysseus and who he is. It tells this from the framework of Achilles as a hero who loses Patroclus, his love, and what that spurs on. But you get a lot of background from this. This is less a journey because when the Iliad opens, they've been in Troy for 9 years and they've been fighting. They already got there. So this is really more like the battle scenes and what the end of that looks like than anything else. Percy Jackson, another kid's book. It's a great modern story involving the gods. If you do want a little more of the gods involved in the tale, there's much more direct contact. Here, it's cute. Diana Gabaldon's Outlander, definitely a journey. She travels through time. A lot of this first book is her trying to find a way back home. She is the heroine, Claire, and there's a bit more romance in here than perhaps the Iliad or the Odyssey, even though you could argue that because there are people who say Patroclus and Achilles were very romantic. Odysseus wanting to go back to his wife was very romantic. Shouldn't have left her in the first place though, should he? Anyways, but this is a woman's journey trying to find her way back home and then realizing that home is no longer where she thought it was. There's definitely bad guys. There are no monsters really in the sense of mythical creatures, but there are human monsters aplenty. And that's about it. I could also bring up Harry because that is the last generation's mythical hero fighting against evil and monsters and also trying to find a home. Because he starts with his home having been taken away, and you can argue that the entire story is him trying to find his way back to that home, which obviously is Hogwarts. And then all this stuff back here is my TBR. Oh, you know who else? Actually, Robin Hobb's Ship of Magic is also of the Odysseus hero trying to find the way to a home. It's on the seas. It's on the wild seas. There are sea creatures. There is loss. Trying to redeem yourself in the eyes of the gods. This is a recent find of mine. I need to read the second one, which is on my TBR shelf. And I really love the characters. Lots of different characters in here. Hopefully you find something in there that feels like an adventure. Go watch the Odyssey. You should read the book at some point, right? It's a classic. But if you don't, that's okay too. And I'll see you in the next one, book friends. Bye.